Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining me. So today we're going to be talking about the Akashic Records, what they are and how you can use them. So again, I am Janie Santor. Thank you for being here with me. I am the spiritual techpreneur. And here's where we have conversations about spiritual tools that help you to gain awareness, to do some healing, and then so you can take some action. So we're going to be talking about the Akashic Records in terms of those different facets of spiritual work. So I am setting up here and I'll get started in just a second. I just want to make sure that everything is working. So I know that one time we did an entire show and it wasn't recording correctly, and so we had to shoot the entire thing again. So thankfully we do have it now available, and so we were successful in getting to record it again, but it was just a little snafu that happened, and then we need to get that done again. So let me just sound check. And since I'm here on my own, this is a one-person show, so that means that I need to both be talking to you and then at the same time making sure that all the tech is working. So yeah, that is it's always a little challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and check the sound, make sure that everything is yes, so everything is working, and I'm just going to set everything up here so that it everything will work. So again, I am going to be talking today about the Akashic Records, what they are and what you can do with them. So primarily, as a spiritual techpreneur, I do work with technology. So I work with different technologies, and I've been trained in different healing modalities and so on. So in the 10 years that I've been on this journey, I've really been focusing on learning a lot of different tools and looking at which tools are better, which ones work for what components and so on. So I was raised Catholic, and so in my upbringing, I was raised in a very traditional type of community. So in my upbringing, I didn't really hear about all of these things. I didn't really learn about them until I really started on my spiritual journey. So if you guys haven't heard that story, I do talk about that story and give you more details in episode 1 of this show. I kind of go into how I got started. So one of the things that I did was I had a Reiki attunement. And so it was with the Reiki attunement that then I got sort of exposed to a different type of energy and really understanding energies in different ways. And so that, of course, then led me down the path of studying and getting trained in different things and really becoming aware of what some of these things were. So a lot of times we have certain experiences, but we process them through the framework that we've been raised in our culture. So I very much raised in kind of a rational type culture where so schooling was very important and science was very important. And as I went through and worked on my bachelor's degree in English literature, there was all this, even though I was connecting in terms of connecting with language and looking at the deeper meaning of things through my study of language and reading, and it came through this literary lens. So really looking at literature and studying literature and then reading and analyzing criticism and then analyzing the literature itself. So that's what I did for my bachelor's degree. And so as I sort of studying or got started in my spiritual path, I was really very much came from that mentality, that very rational, science-oriented type mentality. And so as I moved into spiritual work and then started really wanting to understand how everything related together, how do things work, and certain people have certain beliefs, are those beliefs supported by science? And so then I went through and really studied or read a lot of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and really focused on those scientists that were really making the connection with spirituality. And so I went through those. And so one of the things that I want to do here in the show is share with you some of those kind of seminal texts that I learned from sort of as I came through to this perspective. And so all of that then led me to finally study the Akashic Records, and I did some shamanic work. So my understanding of the Akashic Records are really influenced by the shamanic work and training that I have done. So in fact, part of why I wanted to share these tools with you is to have a conversation about how all of these intersect, and they're really not independent of each other. And so some things work for some specific objectives, and then other things work for other objectives. And so all of that is it's important to understand them, so that when you are using a particular tool, you know what it's most helpful with, and especially when you are in a certain part of your own process or your own spiritual growth process. So finally, I came to work with the Akashic Records. And if you haven't heard of the Akashic Records, or you're not familiar with the Akashic Records, you can think of the Akashic Records kind of like a spiritual database, kind of like the spiritual internet, right? Where everything is there, available, all the information is there. And it's a fifth dimensional tool that anyone can access. So everyone has capacity to access those tools. So, but within the Akashic, so you can think of the Akashic Records kind of like a library that has the records of the different lifetimes, that has records of the different choices that you've made, and so on. So our understanding is that as we make certain choices, then those choices are written into the records, and choices that you have already made are also written into the records. Now, when you are, one of the questions, of course, that we always get is, what about stuff that's happening in the future? Is that written in the records? And really the answer to that is no, because you haven't made those choices yet. So there are certain trajectories that are kind of visible in the records that we can have access to, but mostly those are because you are already on that path. So that means that as you come to a certain crossroads, you're more likely to make a choice or to take action in a certain way because you're already going down that path. So there is probability versus possibility. So the records, of course, anything is, all different choices are available and they're there for us to choose from. But some choices are more probable based on the choices that we've made in the past. So for example, if I wanted to become an astronaut, for example, right? I could say, well, is it possible for me to become an astronaut? Is that possibility available for me, right? And certainly it is available, but there would be a lot of things that would need to happen before that choice was available. And so now if I had been studying aerospace engineering, and if that was my background, if I was working at NASA, for example, then that would be much more of a possibility for me because I'm already going down that path. So in the Akashic Records, you can find out information about your past. So because all of that is written already, so it's easier to find that out. And when you go into the records and you want to find certain information, so there's certain information that's pretty much accessible to us, and then there's other information that may not be accessible. And so sometimes information is not accessible for certain reasons. And so when we go into the records, a lot of times what we can access is mediated by a person's soul. So if in your path you've selected certain experiences, and in order to have those experiences you need to not know some information, then that is then for a reader, for example, somebody goes into the Akashic Records, then that information is not available. And so there's certain times information that there's certain times that I can't get certain information, and that may be for different types of reasons. But most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, information is accessible, or at least certain information is accessible for us. So when you think about the Akashic Records and say, well, they are in the library, and so if you think about our experience right now, we say, well, if I want to go get a book, I would have to travel to the library so that I can check out the book. And so we can think of the records in that way, right, where we're going somewhere, but really we're not going anywhere because it is here. Like, all the information is available to us. The only thing that we need to do is we need to connect with it. So a lot of times we experience that connection process as a traveling, like we need to travel to the library to check out a book, but we're really not traveling anywhere. What we're doing is we're connecting to that knowledge. So very much it is working with the Akashic Records is very much an experience that you can have without an intermediary, right? Which is part of what's so what drew me to all these different tools and all these different processes that I've learned is the fact that I can have my own experience, that I don't need my experience mediated or my connection to the divine mediated by someone else, right? So that's a lot of times when you are in a traditional kind of religious part of it, a religious tradition, then that means that your experience is really mediated by someone else. There is that difference. There's that disconnect between us, right, but as an individual, and the divine or God, or however, or the goddess, however you want to think of the divine. So with working with all these tools basically says you have a direct line of communication to that. You can connect yourself. You don't need anyone else to be able to connect. And so these tools are very empowering. So what really stands in our way to be able to make this connection is breaking free from the belief systems that we may have grown up with, that says that you can't connect yourself, that you can't connect by yourself, that you need somebody else to help you make that connection. And so so that's like the first step. So if you're thinking, well, how can I connect to my records? Well, the first thing you have to do is you kind of need to disconnect from those beliefs that say that you can't connect to the records, that you can't connect to the divine on your own. So that's really what is kind of the first step, right? And a lot of times we need to, when I mentioned meditation as one of the tools that we can use kind of in our spiritual development or in our spiritual path, that's one of the reasons why meditation is so powerful, because it allows us to really distinguish when we have a thought that we really believe, or it's a thought that we've kind of been ingrained or programmed to believe from our culture or our education or our families or wherever those beliefs may come from. And so part of it is really paying attention and thinking about, does that truth, does that information, does that resonate with me as true? So if you're going to connect to your records, then that's one thing. Sort of the first thing that you need to overcome is that you need somebody else to help you connect. You really don't. There are people who teach you how to connect, but basically what we're doing when we teach somebody how to connect is we're helping them to strip those layers where you feel like you're separate from the divine. And really, you can think of the Akashic Records as spiritual information. So if you consider yourself separate from spirit, then that means that it's harder for you to access that information because you believe you can't access it. So that's really the first step in being able to access, but anyone can access that information. So that's something that's really powerful about the records. So you can go into your records and find out why something is happening, what are the different kind of paths that have led you to something, to a particular situation. You can go into the records to get a deeper understanding or awareness of something so that you can understand it at a different level. So you can do that also in the records, and you can get information about past lives. But a lot of times, really, you don't have to get information about past lives. So a lot of people think the Akashic Records, that's the only thing that you can access is information about past lives. But really, in the records, there is a lot more information in the records than just about your own soul and your own lives. So now, one thing that we cannot do, and this is because it's, unless we have permission, is to access information about other souls. And so as an Akashic Records reader, for example, I can go in and access your records if you give me permission. So when I work with my clients, one of the things that I do, of course, is to ask for permission to enter the records. And a lot of times just having that client practitioner relationship, then that means by default that permission has been given. But I can't go into somebody else's records who I don't have permission to read and then just get information from the records. That's not possible. And in a sense, when we think about doing work ethically, whether it's healing work or reading work, we want to make sure that that we follow some guidelines as to what is permissible for us versus what's not permissible. And part of why it's not that we can't access it, but that we shouldn't access it. And one, we need to have permission from the soul to be able to access. So a lot of times we won't be able to access, or we'll be able to access information that's relevant to us or to a client, for example, that is but not all the information. So that's something to consider. But in the records, so you have this information in the records, and then there's a lot of other things that are also in the records. So you can find information about the earth, about different the ways that different things happen. You can find information about the stars. So there's a lot of information that's available to us in the records that's not just about our own Akashic Records. So our own, what one of my teachers calls our own life book. So you can go and you can look at your book, but and so if you think about a library, right? You can go and you can access one book. So that one book is related to your soul, and it has a lot of different chapters and different sections, and information about our current life is only one section of that book. And so then there's a lot of other sections in it. And then also your so if you think about a library, that your book is only one book, and then there's thousands of other books in the library. So the same thing in the Akashic Records is, it's when you go into the records and you look at, you can spend your whole lifetime just perusing your own book, right? So you don't need to necessarily go and look at other things in the records, but you can. So you can find information about a lot of other things in the records. So one thing that you can do in the records is bring back that information. You can bring back information about certain gifts that you have had before, certain knowledge that you have had before, and then integrate it into your current experience. But that's not the only thing that we can do in the records. So part of what we can do is also heal. So when you go into if you think about the Akashic Library, where the records are, the Akashic Library is only one area or one structure you can think of in a broader landscape. So if you think of, I have given this example elsewhere, if you think of the Akashic Records kind of like, or if you think of the Akashics kind of like New York City, right? So there's the New York City Public Library, you can think of that as the records. But then there's a lot of other things in the city that's not necessarily just the library to get information. So you can go and experience other things in the Akashics or in the Akasha. So you can think of, if we are third dimensional beings here, where we have this physical experience, and then we at the fourth dimension, it's the information dimension, and then at the fifth dimension is the spirit dimension. Well, the Akashics are really exist in that fifth dimension, and there's much more than just the information that's available. So you can go into the Akashics, and you can work with a teacher to learn other things. You can work with a healer to get some healing, to get some clearing. So that's something that is also available in the Akashics, right? It's not just in the records, because the records is the library. So you can think of this tool that we have, or this, and I think of the tool the records you can think of as a tool, but also this connection to this fifth dimension is also a tool that you can use for a lot of different purposes. So like I said, awareness and getting information is one piece that you can, or one way that you can work with the records. Then there is healing and learning that you can go and do in other parts of the records that is not necessarily the library. So you can think of, there's the library and then there's Central Park, right? So in Central Park, then there's a lot of things that a lot of places that you can go and you can experience. And then there's other places in New York City that you can go and experience. So there's the Akashics. So you can think of as like this landscape that has a lot of different areas that you can visit and that you can go and experience. So so that's one kind of understanding to expand upon, and rather than thinking about the Akashic Records, one as just this library that you can just go to find out what's happened in your past lives. That's kind of a very narrow view of what is possible in the Akashics, right? And in the Akashic Records, and then in the broader Akashics. So one thing that's so important, though, is that when you are in the Akashic Records, or when you're in the Akashics and you have some sort of transformation, or you find some sort of information for yourself, is that you want to make sure that you bring that back to your third dimensional experience, and that you integrate it. so that you integrate it into the way you think about things. So into that fourth dimension, into how you process things, how you make decisions, how you think about things. All of that is fourth dimensional. But then you also want to ground it into the third dimension. And so you want to consider how that information, how that learning that you've done in this fifth dimension, how you're grounding it and how you're letting that information, how you're letting that influence your actions, how you're letting that really inform the different choices that you make, so that you make choices that are more in alignment with who you are and where you want to go. So a lot of times, some clients that I've spoken to have said, well, I got an Akashic Records reading, but it was interesting because I got to know about my past lives and stuff, but then I didn't know what to do with it. So it kind of went on the bookshelf as something interesting, that some interesting experience, but it wasn't actionable, right? There wasn't a lot that I could do with it. Well, that's really not the experience that I want you to have when you go into the records, or when as a client I go into the records for you. Like, the objective is really so that you can bring that information back and have it be a real transformative experience. And so the only way that it's going to be a transformative experience is if you start to make different choices, if you allow for that information to guide you in how you make decisions and how you take action in your life. And so that is really critical, because we know a lot of times that we're stuck. We kind of either we try something and we don't get any traction, or it doesn't produce the results that we want, or we don't have, perhaps we're stopped by fear and we don't do certain things that we want to do, or we are we're confused about which choice to make, and so we could either go in this direction or we can go in this direction, and because of that confusion, we're really paralyzed and we don't make a choice. So what you can do is you can go into the Akashic Records, you can bring back some of that information, and then you can use that information, integrate it into your way of thinking, and then use that information to help guide your decision making and to help guide the choices that you make and the actions that you take. And then, of course, part of this is having it be something that's lifelong. So it's not something where you're going to use the information and you come back and you're good for the rest of your life. Well, no, you want to use that information and then look at how things go, and then you can visit the records again and go with another question and then get some more information and then come back and apply that information, have that be a way in which you live your life, right? So it's not like you just go on a meditation retreat and then you come back and you only meditate when you go on retreats. Well, then meditation isn't going to be as helpful, right? So what you want to do is you want to integrate it into your daily life. You want to integrate it into your daily experience, everything that you do, so that it's not only something that you do, let's say, in the spiritual dimension or in your spiritual journey, but it's something that you do with your family. It's something that you do if you have a job. It's something that you do at your job. It's something that you do when you interact with your friends, right? So everything is really related, and you can use the information from the Akashic Records to help you lead the life that you really want to be leading, to help you decide, do I want this or do I want this, to help you be more confident and believe in yourself. And a lot of times that's not going to happen in one giant leap. And so sometimes it does happen that way for certain areas of our lives. But, if you think about all the different areas that all the different facets of your life, well, you have your family, you have your profession, you have your health, right? You have your own spiritual development. So there's a lot of different facets to our life. And so how are we going to use it? A lot of times we focus our growth, or we focus a lot of our time and our energy to one of those facets or one of those areas of our life, and we really ignore or neglect another area. And so one of the things that I have learned is that all of this is really to help all of us, right? Is to help the whole of our being, not just one dimension of it. So personal growth isn't just about you as your own person, or spiritual growth isn't just about your own path, but it really encompasses and envelops everything and should affect and influence everything that we do in all different facets of our life. So if you're interested in learning more about the Akashic Records and how you can use it for your own personal transformation, and of course you can start with something, with just one area, something that you're really interested in transforming. So if it's your relationships, or if it's your health, or if it's your employment, or if it's your business, right? We can look at all of that information and you can start working on it little by little. The key is really to integrate that information, to not just have it be something interesting that just goes on the shelf, but to have it be something that you really bring back with you, and that you start using that information on a day-to-day basis and that's what's going to be really transformative. So if you're having a certain area of your life where you're really stuck, where you're really not sure how to move forward, where you may not even know what you want for that particular life area, and that may be why you've been neglecting it or not really paying attention, is because you don't know what you want there. Well, you can use the Akashic Records to help you move forward. Not just in that, but in other areas as well, because ultimately everything is connected. And so when we seek alignment in one area, then other things also are transformed and become better. So I invite you to learn more about the Akashic Records. If you want to learn how to connect with your records, or if you are really not interested in taking the long road, because I really think about learning to work with the Akashic Records is really the long road, and it's really a lifelong endeavor. But let's say you want to take a little shortcut and you want to work with a practitioner to help you to get some of that information and to help you integrate that information, then certainly let me know. You can contact me. There's information on my website about the different readings and the different work that I do with the Akashic Records. And I do both personal work and I work with entrepreneurs to look at the Akashic Records of their business to see the trajectory of the business and the different choices that you have and the different decisions that you can make, and which decisions would be better for the type of results that you want to have. So again, this was a very short introduction to the Akashic Records and to the different possibilities there are when you start working with records. So I invite you to explore this particular topic or this particular tool more. And of course, I will be giving you much more detail and going more in depth for this particular tool because this is the primary tool that I work with when I work with clients. I'm also, of course, going to be talking about other tools, and I'll be bringing in some more guests. So I'm thinking about bringing in a guest to talk about a specific tool about once a month. And then the rest of the time, I'll be sharing my own experience and my own perspective on all these different tools. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you let me know. You can comment below and let me know what questions you may have. Or if you want to find out some more information how the Akashic Records could be helpful for you, you're welcome to schedule a no obligation consultation where we'll kind of just talk about what the Akashic Records are and if they would be useful for whatever situation it is that you are currently experiencing. So thank you for joining me again. My name is Janie Santoy. I'm a spiritual techpreneur, And join me next week where we will continue with our regularly scheduled time frame, which is Tuesday afternoon Central Time. That's when I will be going live. And thank you so much for joining me today, whether you're joining me live or watching the recording. Please make sure to like the video, share this with anyone that you know who may be interested in learning more about the Akashic Records. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please leave a comment. And again, I invite you to set up no obligation consultation if you're interested to learn more specifically what the Akashic Records can do for you. Thanks and have a great weekend.